Hey everyone, welcome to Strategic Selling, one-to-one salesmanship for business owners. It is very, very good to see you. Thank you for joining me. We are live across a couple different channels. Please let me know where you're from and what line of business that you're in. I know I get a lot of people who are interested in any sort of thing that is related to salesmanship because let's face it, salesmanship is it's kind of rare and it's also kind of a perishable skill. It was interesting the other day I got on a sales call and I do a lot of my own selling for Strategic Boardroom, but I also have a product called Strategeo. So that is something that is really, really directed more towards restaurants and those in the restaurant industry. And so I got on a call the other day and realized that I was a little rusty. I was like, huh, and it only had been maybe a week or so and since I actually had a sales conversation. So it was interesting that I got a little lazy. I got a little over my skis and I was like, "Oh, wait a minute. Hold on a sec. Let me back up." The call went extremely well, by the way. They are likely to move forward with the Strategeo product, but it was and it's based around automations for for restaurant those in the restaurant industry that are trying to capitalize and make money off of the people who are in their Facebook and Instagram audiences. So it's really interesting, but that's something you have to recognize is that this is a perishable skill. So if you are in any sort of sales and you're just here to sharpen the saw, good for you. So please let me know where you're at and what line of work that you're in. So we got a couple people on YouTube and one on Facebook, a handful on LinkedIn. Excellent. So please let me know. Let's go ahead and type this. Welcome. Please let me know where you're at and what you do. Okay, excellent. All right, so let's get to it right now. We've got a lot to cover, and I always seem to just keep adding more things onto this as I continue to do these over and over. And I really enjoy this one. This is probably one of my more favorite ones, just because I really enjoy selling. I used to not, and one of the things that used to really struggle with was I didn't recognize what selling really was. I thought it was about holding people's heads underwater until they say yes and overcoming objections and doing all that stuff. And man, that is if you're having to do that, you have messed up way earlier on in the process. And it's almost like the close will happen on its own. You don't have to be a jerk about it. You don't have to ask for the sale. You can't be timid about it, but you also just kind of know. You kind of know when it's ready. And if you're trying to rush this along or move things along faster than they should, and sometimes they do just take a couple of meetings. I generally like to do them in one or two. I really don't like to do 5 or 6 different meetings. I think there's just a lot of delaying that's going on. There's generally, even for large transactions, there's really no reason to kick this can down the road. And I get, well, you don't really understand the complexity. No, I do. I'm not talking due diligence periods. I'm actually talking about the selling process itself. So in selling, I do like to make the distinction specifically between selling where there's one-to-one selling and there's one-to-many selling. What this involves is the number of people in the conversation, okay? Or I'm sorry, not necessarily many of the people that are in the conversation, but how many buying decisions are going to be made in that conversation. So in other words, I could be selling an insurance product to a married couple. I could be selling a boat to a married couple. That would be one to one. That's one sale, right? I could be having that conversation with a family about an entire parcel of land that they want to buy collectively, right? So that even though there might be 8 or 10 people in the room, there's one buying decision to be made. So I think that's the main decision. That's the main line in the sand that I make is how many buying decisions are being made in that room. Let's say I have 10 parcels of land to sell and there's 100 people in the room. Okay, so that would be one to many because there would be 10 different buying decisions to be made, or maybe one person wants to buy all 10, right? But regardless, you're presenting this as a number of people who are going to be making those buying decisions. So that's the distinction. So what I'm going to be talking about today is specifically one-to-one selling. So who is this for? This is for business owners who really do a lot of their own selling and specifically and maybe struggle at this a little bit. And let me know. Let me know in the comments. Do you feel like this is something that you just don't do well, or is it something that you do well and but maybe you could feel better? And generally, I also ask these questions like, do you feel like you have to convince something to do something that they don't want to do? If that is you, if and there's a reason you're getting buying resistance, there's someone I know well, and I'm not going to say who it is because I don't want to embarrass them, but their approach is just so aggressive and always about the sale. It's never about really solving the problem. And I think they try to dress it up as trying to solve the problem and acting in a way that's about really caring about the person, but there's just something that just does not come across that way. And it's always seems like, man, you're always trying to just sell me on something. It's really annoying, right? And that person spends so much time trying to convince them that they need that I need this thing or someone else needs this thing, that it just comes across as really icky. And it doesn't have to be that way. Maybe you hate asking people for money, if that's something that you struggle with. And I know a lot of people do. If you have a bad relationship with money, you're going to struggle with selling. And that's just something that I see with a lot of people. And I also feel like when people say, well, I just don't want to bother people. And this comes along the lines of following up, but also asking people if they really need something. And I use the metaphor very often. If you're driving down the interstate, it's 3 a.m, okay, and it's reasonably safe. Let's say that's reasonably safe, and you're with someone that you can feel reasonably safe with. Let's say you're driving down the road with SEAL Team 6, okay, and you're driving along, and you got 3 gallons of gas in a gas tank in the back, okay, and a little fuel can, and you're driving, and it's not your gas, okay, but you're driving it, you're bringing it to a friend's house, and you know your job is just to get it there. And you see someone broken down on the side of the road, and you pull up along the side, and he's like, hey, you guys need any help? Because I got 3 gallons of gas in the back. You know, I mean, I can't give it to you. It's not my gas to give you, but I can sell it to you for, you know, like $30 because I got to go out of my way to buy it. And you know, my friend's going to wonder what took so long, and then I have to do this. So it's really not my gas to sell, but you know, I could sell it to you for $30. You know, it would get you going. And man, in that moment in time, they're broken down side of the road. Would they be willing to pay that $30? Or, and people are like, that's a ripoff. Okay, well, what does AAA charge? They charge like $125 for a gallon of gas. So the point is, it's not that you're solving this problem for them, and they go, no, I'm good. Okay, cool. Hey, best of luck, right? And you go on about your way. So I'm using that as a very silly example because people are like, oh, I just give them the gas. It's not about that. Don't make it about the transaction. Make it about the problem that you can solve for them and how much they would literally pay in that moment to solve that problem. And that goes, how many problems could you solve for someone? Let's say that you were able to, because of the way that you would be able to solve their problem with their own limiting beliefs or with their self-sabotaging behaviors or with their marketing or with their sales process or with their operational functions. If you were able to take their business from $1 million to $30 million, would it make sense for you to charge $100,000 to solve that $29 million problem that they have? Of course it would. That makes all mathematical sense in the world. This is why I'm saying you cannot have, you're there as a salesman to bring and solve problems. And that's the whole premise behind this. So everything we're going to be talking about a little bit upfront, not everything, but in terms of the Viper framework, we're going to talk about this. This is what I wrote about in the Time Wealthy Advantage. It's not a sales book, but this specifically is, I forgot to put the banner up. I always do that. There we go. So when I talk about the Viper framework, that's what is in this book here. If you are interested in getting a copy of the book, you can go to strategicboardroom.com, and you'll see that scrolling along the bottom here in just a second. But you go to strategicboardroom.com, there's a button right on the main page. You can buy it. If you are living in the United States and you would like a signed copy of that, you can go in there and get it for cheaper than on Amazon. However, if you live outside the United States and you'd still like a copy, your best bet is to get it on Amazon. You can go to Amazon, buy it there, and it is way faster. And unfortunately, I can't sign it because they go straight from them. But that would be your best bet. There's also, this is the entire series of books that I wrote last year, the Time Wealthy Advantage plus the 4 guides. You can get all those on Amazon too if you're interested in. But the point is that even though I've written all these books, and I'm saying this not to impress you, but to impress upon you that if you're doing sales well is efficient. It doesn't take an enormous investment in time. It doesn't take a lot of energy to do it right, but it does take research. It does take doing it well and doing it well up front. And that's the main thing. I've done business well. I've done business poorly. I've been broke, and I've also done pretty well financially. And now that I've kind of cracked the code on all of this stuff, the biggest thing that is most important to me is my time. Because the reality is this: there's no point in making a pile of money if it takes all of your waking hours to do it. You do have to spend time doing it. And again, sometimes there's just days that you're not gonna do well in sales. And there's other days you're like, oh my gosh, I mean, everything you touch turns to gold. That's fine. But the point is that it should not take all of your waking hours to do the selling. Because the truth is this: I spend a lot of time at what our daughter calls the jumpy place, which is literally the most exhausting place on the planet for an adult. But when you're young and limber and can jump around for 45 minutes straight, that is absolutely the best place on the planet. But we do this during lunchtime, or we'll have a picnic during the day. Not now. It's like today is like the warmest day we've had so far this year, but or we go to the bowling alley. And this is all stuff that we can do all throughout the day in different times of the day. Yes, I do work during the day, but if she asks me, and my bride is able to make it work with our schedule, and I've got an opening on my calendar, or I'll just budget for that time. And that's just an amazing thing to do. So this is what we're talking about. There is a lot to unpack here today. We're going to go through the agenda quite fast, and then I will probably be about another hour or so altogether. So strap in, get your favorite beverage, and let's get to the agenda right now. We're going to talk a little bit about the Viper framework. I'm not going to go through the whole 5-step Viper framework. That is not the scope of this call, because I'm just giving you the first premise around the vision component, just so you can understand and give you some context as to why the rest of this will matter. We're going to get into the 4 core functions, but specifically dial in on sales, and then we're going to start with what's known as the discovery call, or basically the initial contact with your prospect, with the person that is asking and needing some help. They're saying, man, you have something that I need help with, and that's a discovery call. That's really having an initial conversation with the human being on the other side of the equation. And you can just say, hey, look, let's figure this out. Let's see if what I have to offer may be suitable for you. And it's really more of a qualification call. It's to see if they have if they've got the right components, and if it is someone who actually you would want to work with. Then you get into the actual sales conversation. That may be in that same moment. You might go straight from discovery call and qualification directly into selling, or that might be a whole separate day. That might be a few weeks later, because the discovery call is really going to be that qualification, whereas the sales conversation is actually where you do the salesmanship. So we'll get into that a little bit, and then we'll talk some success strategies. I just want to let you know at the end of this, if you are interested, I'm going to be reference it throughout the session, but I have a community where we talk about this stuff all the time, not just about selling, but around lead generation, around sales, around operations and management and leadership, and also accounting and finance. So we talk about all of these different things in the 4 core functions of business. So if you are looking to take your business to the next level, I would invite you to stick around. I'll show you what it's all like in the community. There's very affordable options for everybody if you're just starting out, or if you are doing quite well and you want to do quite better. So that's what we'll talk about. All right. So again, when you're actually selling, and this is the thing that I want you to understand, is if you are selling, and the main thing around selling is I hear that people like, oh yeah, they are, yeah, how was their experience with them? Oh, they were satisfied, a satisfied customer. And I understand why people say that, because satisfied customers is what we've been told that we want forever, right? Being a satisfied customer, having satisfied customers. But I'm telling you that satisfied customer is the base standard. Let's say that, Jessica, let's say that you go to dinner with a friend and it's at a restaurant you haven't been to before. And you and your friend go to this restaurant and you're seated in a reasonable amount of time. And the waiter brings he's friendly enough and brings the drinks and brings the menus, bring the drinks. You order, the food comes out in a reasonable amount of time. The food is reasonably tasty. And you get the bill and you pay it and it's reasonable and you leave and you are therefore satisfied. Jessica, tell me, how many people are you going to tell about that satisfactory experience? Probably not very many, right? That is the default setting. Satisfied customer is not saying very much. You've not done anything at all to make this even a happy customer. Really? Happy? You want a happy customer? No, the thing is this. Let's say for argument's sake that you and this friend were connecting for the first time in a while. And instead of just being seated, the person who was handing you like, hey, is there anything that you guys are are celebrating tonight? No, we haven't connected in a long time, and we're we just want to catch up. Oh, okay. How long have you guys been friends? Oh, we've been friends for since high school. We've been friends for 20 years. Wow, that's fantastic. Do you guys want a quieter place in the back where you guys can connect and it's a little bit quieter back there, or do you mind just sitting anywhere? And they're like, oh, actually that would be really nice if you could sit us in the back where it's a little bit quieter. That would be phenomenal, right? What has that person done? They've taken just a little bit of effort just to get to know you a little bit. And if you're making all of these little efforts along the way, all of a sudden you're not having a satisfied customer. They're not even a happy customer. Now they become a raving fanatic about who you are and what it is that you represent and all of the things that you bring. Like, oh my gosh, they were just so attentive. Not just about doing their job, but recognizing that we are human beings that are two people that are trying to connect. And he wanted to make sure that he set the environment as best as he could, to make that connection, that possibility for connection, as good as possible. Okay, so this is what I'm saying about creating raving fanatics, and that is your job, and it starts in the marketing, and the first human contact that they're having is usually the salesperson. So again, your whole job is to create raving fanatics, and you do that by creating trust with the customer. So we're taking a strategic approach to managing your life and your business, and everything, like I said, a strategic approach comes out of this book, The Time Wealthy Advantage. So if you are looking to create that in your business, this is where the rest of the Viper framework comes from. But we are only going to be talking about the vision portion of the Viper method here, which again, the Viper method is vision, infrastructure, process, execution, and reporting. So we're not going to be getting into all of the 5 elements, but we are going to be taking just a piece out of the vision component and talking about that today. The vision is made up of 2 components. It's made up of both personal vision and business vision. And the personal vision is going to say like, okay, cool. How, where is it you want to go? Like Jessica, where do you want to go? Joe, where do you want to go? Billy, where do you want to go in your life? If you woke up tomorrow with $30 million in your bank account, what would your life look like if you didn't worry about income generation? These are the sorts of things that are important for you to start to consider. Because once that's defined, then you put a business vision in place and say, cool, if that's where you want to go, let's figure out how you're going to get there, okay? And when you start figuring out how you're going to get there, again, this is an important consideration to think of now, because now you can reverse engineer this business vision that's going to deliver that personal vision for you. And it's interesting though, because I meet with a lot of business owners and they create business visions without ever giving any personal vision any consideration. And the danger in creating a business vision before creating a personal vision is that you end up creating a life that exists to serve the business. And I'm just telling you, that sucks. It's an empty well that just never gets filled in. So these are the sorts of things that you need to start to consider now and start thinking about what you want your life to look like in advance, and then bring that business vision and use that to be the mechanism that delivers that personal vision for you. That's exactly what I've done. That's exactly why I've exited several businesses, and the other businesses they're running and doing their thing, but I'm really spending my time doing the things that I want to do now in this business vision that I'm really enjoying, and which is strategic boardroom. So one of the things when we're talking about business vision, specifically when you're looking at business vision, is you have to spend a lot of time on research. And what do I mean by research? I mean, you have to know your people, you have to know your product or service backwards and forwards, and you have to know their level of pain. You have to know everything about these people. The people that you are trying to help, the people that you are trying to help with your product or service, and you have to know all the ways that your product or service can be utilized, not just in the normal way, but in every way that can solve that problem. Many people confuse me for a business coach, and even endearingly will call me coach, but I am not a coach. I'm a strategist, and there are significant differences between a coach and a strategist. One of the main reasons why I'm different, and because I have done this research and spent this time learning to differentiate myself, is I tend to think very big picture. I have that ability to what's called, which is called systems thinking. And systems thinking is looking at all the interrelationships of all the things that go on as the system. So if you adjust something over here, it has likely an impact of something over here. That's what systems thinkers do. They look at the interrelationship between all of the individual components. That's not typical for a coach. And not to say that there's anything wrong with coaching. I've employed many coaches in my life, not just personal, from a personal coaching perspective, as a where there's fitness coaches and things like that, even business coaches, but they tend to be very narrow in certain areas. But strategists are different. Strategists do employ the tools of coaching, but they tend to have a much larger picture. They have a much larger frame. So that's just one example. But I wouldn't have been able to do this if I didn't research the difference in what a strategist does versus what a general coach does, or what a business coach does, or what a life coach does. And that's a main difference. So this is where you have to do the research, not only on your own product or service, but also on the people that you most want to help. If you don't know them very well, it's going to be hard for you to help them. So let's get into and unpack the 3 C's of business vision. So we really talked about personal vision there for a second. Let's talk about business vision. Anytime I get invited in and hired in as a strategist or as a fractional CSO, which is a chief strategic officer, where I'm working with the C-suite of individuals, anytime that I get hired in, I'm looking through the lens of these 3 C's to see where they are having problems. Because if they are having problems with turnover, if they're having problems with their lead generation, if they're having problems with staff retention, if they're having trouble with profitability, I'm telling you, it's in one of these 3 C's. And these 3 C's of business vision are core purpose, core values, and client avatar. So let's unpack what each of these 3 C's are. And you might be thinking, what does this have to do with selling? It has everything to do with selling. Because if you're not clear in any one of these areas, it's going to show. And you're going to be a little bit less committed. You're going to be a little tentative in the sale. And I'm telling you, it's like blood in the water. People will know. They're like, I don't know. He didn't seem really committed. He didn't seem like he really was competent when we got talking about this one area. And I don't know, any hesitation will get noticed. And it might be some body language shift or hesitancy in your language or something. You have got to be sure when it comes to the sale. And you can't do that unless you know all 3 of these 3 C's of business vision. So let's unpack this. Core purpose is specifically what business that you're in and what problems do you specifically solve. And you have to be highly specific in your answers. Listen, I've done over 100 webinars over the last year. That's a true statement. If you don't believe me, you can go to Eventbrite and you can see. You can see there's a little ticker on there that tells you how many webinars someone's done through Strategic Boardroom, and it's been 100. And I'm the only one doing them. So every single time I bring this up, these 3 C's of business vision. And when someone comes to me, they're like, oh, I've been watching your videos for a while. I really need some help. And I talk to them. I was like, okay, cool. Well, what business are you in? Well, I do a lot of things. And they're core purpose is so fragmented and misaligned. I'm like, well, no wonder you're so fragmented. And one of the metaphors that I really feel like I have landed on that really seems to stick with people is that of a mechanic. And a mechanic is someone who obviously they repair passenger rated vehicles. Okay, so let's pretend that you are a mechanic and you repair passenger rated vehicles. Fine, let's look at that from that perspective. So if you're a mechanic and you are fixing passenger rated vehicles, you probably will replace headlights. You'll probably replace taillights. You probably replace wiper blades and serpentine belts, and you probably do tune-ups. You're replacing alternators and batteries and maybe even rotating tires and brake jobs and things like that. Make sense? So will that same mechanic work on dump trucks? Probably not. Will that same mechanic work on lawnmowers? Probably not, because they can't charge enough to make it worthwhile. Will they work on transmissions? No, probably not. And the reason for that is because transmissions are so specialized now that it doesn't make sense for them to pull into that, start tearing into this thing, because they don't really know what they're getting into. They're just saying, you know what, that's not really what we do. So really, this core purpose is about really being really specific about what it is that you do and being a little obnoxious about what you won't do. That's when people are going to know what you're dialed into your core purpose. And that is really important, because if you are too fragmented, people are not going to feel like you're very committed in one specific direction. I'm not going to bring a high-end vehicle or the vehicle that my family travels around in every single day, that my wife and my daughter travel in every single day, to someone who kind of does a little bit of everything when it comes to vehicles. I'm not okay with that. There's two shops that we bring our vehicles to here in town, and they always do a great job. One's a little bit more expensive than the other, but it's always worth it. So I'm just saying, this is where the core purpose has to come in. Think of yourself, you can do multiple things. That's fine, but make sure it stays within an overall core purpose. Make sure it stays within that, hey, we work on passenger rated vehicles and making them safe and getting them on the road as quick as we possibly can. Make sense? Let's go to core values. So we talked core purpose. Core values is what matters to you about this business. And how would the world be worse off if you went out of business? And you might think, what is core value? This sounds awful squishy. What does core values have to do with my sales, with my selling and my salesmanship? It has everything to do with it, because this is going to determine the type of person that is sitting in front of you, that you determine if you want to do business with that person. So have you ever worked alongside someone that doesn't align with your core values? Yeah, it sucks, right? Or maybe you were even in a relationship with someone where you were once aligned in your core values, but something changed in them, or maybe something changed in you, and you were no longer willing to live in that same set of core values that you once did. You grew as an individual, but maybe they didn't. And that becomes a problem, right? And this is how when you're starting to define these things as core values, you don't want to end up doing work for people who don't align with your core values. This is why it's important to take the time to define what your core values are. So there's a whole thing that we get into, and this is in part of the 90-day course that I have, where you really walks you through your personal core values and helping to determine what your business core values are. So that way you can determine what those core values are for your business. So you're not only attracting the people that you most want to work with, but the people you most want to work for you in terms of your employees and your vendors and your subcontractors. And that is your core values. So the thing when it comes to your core values is your core values is what determines your company culture. And your company culture and your company brand are inextricably linked. And your company culture is what's experienced by the people inside your organization. And the core values are what is experienced by people outside your organization. So it's really important that you take the time to define these company core values. So next, let's talk about the client avatar. This is the third C of business vision. And that is your client avatar. So who specifically and ideally do you want to serve? And it's important that you define them as best that you possibly can. And that is through their geographics, their demographics, and their psychographics. When you're thinking about their geographics, it's important you think about where they are. Where are these people? Not just where are they specifically like are they in your neighborhood, but maybe just where are they at online? Like where are they at where you can reach them? That's probably like the whole concept of geographics is kind of gone out the window, because I've literally started working with people all across the world. People come to these sessions that are in Germany and the UK and Ireland, and I mean, I'm here in the Midwest in the United States, but I frequently get people from Sydney, Australia, and India, and all of these different places across the world, and in Africa and Ghana. It's extremely humbling. I had someone from Germany on just the other day, which is extremely humbling, and they're starting to buy from me. They're starting to buy products, which is again incredibly humbling. So for me, it's not necessarily about, okay, are they only in the United States, but where are they? Well, they are online. And if they're not online internationally, then I don't have a way of reaching them. So think about that from that perspective of not just geographics in unless of course you have like a babysitting business and you physically need to be there. But think about where they are in terms of geographics. Let's just say take a quick hello. My name is Rehab from Egypt, and there we go. See, we have Egypt today. And I have an online store to sell Korean skincare products. Fantastic, I love that. So for you, Rehab, it would be important for you to think of geographics of where are these people where they could buy the products online. As I mentioned earlier, like I sell my books, but I don't generally want to sell my books internationally because I don't have any sort of table for international shipping rates. I have no idea how that works, right? And to be quite frank, I don't want to mess with that. But I do have a mechanism for people to buy my books where they can just buy it on Amazon. I still make money, but it's less, and I don't get to capture their information. But I still do have a mechanism for them. So for you, where do these people reside that you want to sell to online? That's fantastic. Welcome. Glad that you could join us today. So when you're looking at the geographics of where they are, then you start thinking about their demographics. Their demographics is who they are. Who they are in terms of, are they married? Are they single? Are they old? Are they young? Are they rich? Are they poor? Are they educated or not educated? What are they at demographically? And then think of them in terms of psychographics, which is how they think and how they buy. And psychographics is probably one of the things that gets overlooked. And I'm telling you, if you understand their psychographics, you are a massively ahead of anybody else that has done selling. So think of their term in the phrase ALIA, ALIA, which is their attitudes, their lifestyles, their interests, and their aspirations and goals. So when you really understand their attitudes, especially their attitudes towards your product or service, or their attitudes towards your industry, that is how you can sell them. Understanding their lifestyle, what their lifestyle is like, and their interests, what things do they care about, but also their aspirations. Where are they going? Where do they want to be? What are their goals in life? And if you can understand their goals in life and you can align your product or service with their goals, with their aspirations, and I'm telling you, it's a license to print money. So really stop and think and do the homework. Spend a little bit of time and think about how you can help these people in understanding their demographics, their geographics, their demographics, and their psychographics. And all these three things relate to the 3 C's of business vision: core purpose, core values, and client avatar. I'm not going to mention any more about the Viper framework. Like I said, if you're interested in more of that, that's something else we can do at another time. But I just want to put the fries in the bag on that right now, because it is important, just for the sake of time, that we get to the 4 core functions of business. And this has got to be true in every single business. And the 4 core functions, this is universal across businesses. I don't care what kind of business that you're in, but it has to have these 4 functions, which is lead generation, sales, operations, and accounting. And your customer's journey through your business happens in that order. So if you got to keep in mind that your people are experiencing your business firsthand and initially through the lead generation function. It's letting the world know that you're out there through a variety of marketing approaches. But you got to also understand that effective selling starts in the lead generation function. Yes, the lead generation function is its own thing, but they have to work together, because if the lead generation function is acting in a certain way or is attracting a certain person and the salesmanship doesn't match the lead generation, they are going to be confused, and the confused mind will always say no. So in other words, let's say for argument's sake that your lead generation through your advertising or your networking or whatever, let's say that it's very formal, and it's it's very formal, it's very it's very suit and tie sort of vibe that is given off. And then when they encounter the salesperson is very casual, and they maybe they and they see the suit and tie, and then all of a sudden they get on a Zoom call and someone's wearing a pair of sweatpants and a t-shirt, and they're like, that doesn't match, something's off. Like, what, like, did I catch you at a bad time? Did you just fall out of bed? Are you not feeling well? Like, this is why you have to recognize that the lead generation has to match the selling. So, and again, in this casual world, I will absolutely recognize that the world has gotten a little bit more casual. Yes, I'm wearing a jacket with a black t-shirt. This is significantly more casual than what I used to wear, which I would wear a suit every day. That was part of my daily uniform, because that's just what I wore every single day. Now I am a little bit more casual, but even still, with this jacket, it's important because that sort of thing matters. So I'm not overly formal, but I'm also not overly casual. I've done these before with sweatshirts and t-shirts and things like that. But you know what? I needed to step my game up a little bit. I was like, you know what? I think I'm getting a little bit too casual. But again, these things ebb and flow. So I'm just saying, you have to make sure that you're matching everything in your lead generation matches what you're trying to do in your selling. So that's important. The main thing about this is delivering massive amounts of value to your client avatar, and your whole job is to create trust with the prospect. You're going to hear me talking about this a lot. In terms of creating trust, there are 7 trust triggers. Now, there's lots of different trust triggers, but the thing with these trust triggers is, all that does is it gives people a sense that they can trust you. It's not necessarily the definitive answer on everything around trust, but if you can demonstrate some authority, right? And by the way, like, that could be by authoring a book. One of the courses that I have within the classroom community is about writing and publishing a book as a business owner. And I have written and published 8 different books. And that really helps demonstrate authority to your client avatar. So what could you write? What book could you publish? And use that as a lead magnet for your client avatar, for the people you're trying to attract. Affinity is about, remember back in the 3 C's of business vision under client avatar, where we talked about geographic, demographic, and psychographic, and it talked about the interests. The interest is like a shared affinity. That's what affinity means. It's like a shared interest or a shared geography, something that you both share. You have an affinity. You have a shared affinity for it, right? Demonstration. Again, the fastest way to build trust with someone is to show them what you're talking about. Demonstrate to them that you know what you're doing. And that's a really great way to start to talk about trust. And you might say, well, listen, maybe you're frustrated. Does anybody here feel frustrated with their selling? Does anybody here feel like they get to the ask, and when they hate asking people for money? And anytime I start talking about when people struggle with different sort of things like procrastination or seeking perfection or not being able to, starting projects and not finishing projects, they're like, oh my gosh, yes, you know me, right? Well, it's because I've not only experienced that myself, but I've done a tremendous amount of research on my avatar. So when I start talking in that way, it lets them know, like, not just from an affinity perspective, but also demonstrating that I know what their struggle is. What about endorsement? Endorsement's just getting those testimonials from people that you've worked with, which is phenomenal. Vulnerability is demonstrating there's something known as the where you're showing the damaging admission is what it's called, where you're showing some potential shortcomings when you have demonstrated, or you're letting them know, hey man, this is something I used to struggle with too until I figured this out. That's that damaging admission. And that's really, really powerful. But it's also showing them authenticity, which people really appreciate. The last one is association, where there's a correlation or some sort of connection between you two. So it's not it's similar to affinity, but maybe you have a shared connection, like you're both in BNI, or you both belong to a certain trade organization or something along those lines. Okay. So these are the sorts of things where there's trust, these trust triggers. It just starts to lean people in that direction where they can trust you. But remember, the fastest way to create trust with someone is to demonstrate competence. Demonstrate that you know what you're talking about. And that is, I'm just letting you know, like when it gets back down to the 3 C's of business vision, you have to start thinking about that and start bringing people in and demonstrating that you know what you're talking about and letting them know all of the important things. Because when you get back to this and you're starting to demonstrate competence and you're looking at these 3 C's of business vision, this is why these 3 things have to be dialed in. So let me ask you, and you can answer it or not answer it. I'm not here to put anybody on blast, but from 1 to 10, with your core purpose, how well defined is your core purpose? From 1 to 10, your core values, how well defined are your core values? And from 1 to 10, how well defined is your client avatar? And I'm just saying, if none of these things are written down, you can't say they're any more than a 5. So if you're really looking to get these things and to really take your sales to a whole nother level and your business to a whole other level, you need to start treating it a little bit better and not just flying by the seat of your pants. Be strategic. And you can't be strategic if you're just wandering and not have these things written down as part of your battle plan. So again, you don't have to answer the question or put it down in the chat if you don't want to. But I'm just saying, where are you at in each of these three things? And be honest with yourself and do the work that you need to do. Just remember that the market judges you by what you give away for free. The market judges you by your samples. And this is what was written about in there was a guy named Claude Hopkins. He wrote Scientific Advertising. I think he published it in the 1920s. And he said this. He recognized that the door-to-door salesmen of that day, the ones who were the most profitable, what they would do is they would show up and give samples to the ladies of the house, and they would drop off little Brillo pad samples or little scouring pads or little solutions that would clean certain pots or pans or whatever. And they would say, hey, and come back the next day. Hey, how did you like that? Oh, it was amazing. Cool. Would you like to buy this whole batch? That's what they would do even back then. So make sure your samples are good. Make your samples high value. Don't give away junk. Don't give away crap, because if you're like, well, I have to give away that, you have to pay for the really good stuff. No, find a way to give them something that's going to give them an early win. Because otherwise, if they're judging you, if the only thing they have to judge you by is what you're teaching them or what you're showing them or what you're demonstrating them, and if what you're demonstrating to them is junk, they're not going to buy from you. So this all gets down to this context of solutions-based selling, finding a solution that they actually need. The reason, so I mentioned earlier, and it mentioned why salesmanship is a perishable skill. There was one thing on the call that I forgot to mention to that individual when we got on the call. And that was, hey, are you looking to actually grow your business? Are you looking for more business? I should have asked that question up front, and I didn't. I just kind of launched right into it. Now, I did the right thing. It wasn't an egregious thing, but I realized it later on, and I came back to it, and then it was like a question was out of order. He still answered it, and he answered it. It was like, yeah, I'm interested in growing my business. Okay, because if you're actually happy with where you're at, the rest of this conversation is going to be somewhat irrelevant. So I did fix it, but my point is, it was about finding the solution up front, and I don't want to you don't want to be the solution looking for a problem. You want to understand what it is that they need, and then if what you have solves that, then position yourself that way. And that's exactly what solutions-based selling is all about. So let's get into the first and foremost, the discovery call. So discovery call is about aligning first and foremost. It's really about qualification. That's all you're doing. You're just trying to qualify them up front. So when they have seen and experienced your company through your lead generation, through your marketing, through whatever it is, now you're in the sales function. And by the way, for those of you who just showed up, please let me know where you're from, where you're at, and what line of work that you're in. I also need to take a drink of water. So when you're in the lead generation, when you're in your sales mode, in your sales conversation, You have to remember, and I brought this up earlier, but I'm going to bring it up again. Your lead generation and your sales must be in alignment, because if they are not in alignment, it's going to be very confusing. Again, I used that example earlier on, that if the lead generation was very formal and then the sales person was very informal and very casual and dropping F-bombs and everything else, like, that's not going to work. That's going to be very confusing to the prospect, and the confused mind will always say no, because that's what's safe. That's what's safe. Even though they may need what it is that you have, they're going to opt for safety. So all of this effort, the lead gen, your sales functions, everything is going to be directing them towards the core offering. So what do I mean by the core offering? It doesn't necessarily mean you only have one thing to offer. Remember the mechanic who works on passenger-rated vehicles? They don't just do tires. They don't just do brake jobs. They don't just do tune-ups. They do everything related to a passenger-rated vehicle except a couple of things. They may not sell you tires. Most of them don't have space enough for an inventory of tires. And they may not do transmission work, because again, that's highly specialized. But there's certain things that they will do, and there's probably certain things that they won't do. And that core offering for your neighborhood mechanic is about getting your passenger-rated vehicle back on the road as quick as possible. Now, that doesn't mean as cheap as possible. Maybe it is. Maybe they're competing on price, which I would recommend not competing on price. But if you could say, no, we're going to do this as fast as possible because we've only got 2 bays, and we've got 3 or 4 lines of cars ready to come in at any given time. Our core offer is we want to get your vehicle completely done from start to finish within 48 hours. And we're not going to be the cheapest, but I'm letting you know we're really good at what we do, and we want to honor that promise. So that could be the core offering around passenger-rated vehicles. So whatever the core offering is, you've got to be really clear about that, because when you're clear about your core offering, it will show. That's why I like working with business owners, and generally business owners who are married, who have kids at home, who are really, really busy, and they are absolutely time weary. I know that because I know that's part of my core offering. And that core offering, where I work with them in the lead generation, the sales, the operations, and the accounting. Those 4 areas. If you were coming to me and asking me about taxes, I can maybe have an opinion, but I'm going to send you to the tax guy. I'm going to send you to the tax accountant or the tax attorney, depending on what the issue is. Maybe they were asking me about certain trust documents, and I'm like, I don't know. Maybe you should talk to a trust attorney. Okay, so I know enough. Just like your neighborhood mechanic may have an opinion about your transmission, they're probably not going to mess with it. And that's the same thing. So what is your core offering? Where are those lines in the sand? And you have to be really clear about what the core offering is. So the way that you can start to think about when you're having conversations with these people is start to think about the 15 reasons why people will buy. What are the 15 reasons why people will buy? And what does this have to do with the price of tomatoes? Well, I'll tell you. When you understand why people are going to want to buy from you, I'm going to take myself down so you can maybe take a screenshot of this. But I want you to think about this in terms of why people are going to want to buy from you. So, I want you to think of the reasons why they want to buy from you in terms of how do you help them make money? How do you help them save money or save time, avoid effort, escape pain? And that could be emotional pain or physical pain, spiritual pain. How do you help them with more comfort or better health? Better health could also be less stress. How about gaining praise or feeling more love or increasing their status and increasing their status with their tribe? People will buy for truth, especially if they have felt lied to in the past. They will buy for growth, especially for growth in their knowledge, growth in their wellness, even growth in their faith. People will buy for novelty just because something is new. They will buy for certainty. And they will also buy, certainty is also more perceived control. They will also buy to be in contribution to others. So you're going to take this list and what are you going to do with it? Well, I want you to think about all the ways that your product or service could help them make money. Come up with 7, 8, or 10 reasons how you help them make money, directly or indirectly. How do you help them save money, directly or indirectly, with your product or service? Do the same thing with saving time, avoiding effort. I want you to come up with 10 reasons, directly or indirectly, how you help them with all 15 of these reasons. That way, you've thought about it in advance. It's not the first time you're trying to fabricate it when you're sitting in front of the prospect. But when you have these 150 different reasons, 150 different ways how you help with your product or service, help them in different ways, now you're not fabricating it for the first time. You've already given it some thought. And this is how you establish this requisite variety of knowledge that can really help you in your selling process, in the salesmanship, game. That's what this is all is. It's all about research. It's all about making sure that you're prepared. So let's get to the discovery call. And the rest of this really isn't a lot. I'm just going to get kind of into the, I'm not going to get into the granular details here because I literally could spend probably the rest of the evening showing you this, but I'm just going to get into the discovery call. And remember, the discovery call is really just the initial conversation that you're having with these individuals. It's important that you ask them these few questions. There's 5 questions here during the discovery call, and you have to ask them. I don't particularly care which order they're in, but I put them in the most logical order that it makes sense. So after they've called you or they've come into your store or whatever it is, and they're looking for whatever it is to address whatever issue they have, you need to ask them, okay, cool, how quick are you looking to address this issue? Right now, if it's a very transactional thing, like, hey, do you have a widget? You're like, yeah, cool, I've got widgets. Well, how long has this been going on with your, I mean, if it's a $5 part, they don't really need the discovery, right? But if it's something where it's going to be a larger investment, so you got to use some discernment here. But if it's going to be something where it's going to be a sizable investment, how soon are they looking to address this issue? Don't assume that because they're calling now that they want to address the issue now. You can't make that assumption. So it's important that you ask them how quickly they're looking to solve this problem. Next, it's important to ask them what kind of budget are they working with. So did you have a budget in mind? And many times they won't. When people call me for strategy work and they're going to ask me what it costs to do this, I'm like, well, I don't know, because I don't know the scope of the problem, number one. I mean, I can give you some numbers here in a little bit, but do you have a budget in mind that you're working with? And many times they won't know. They'll say, but we don't even know what to, and so I will tend to give them a ballpark, but I'm careful, because if I say like, oh, it's anywhere between 1,000 to 2,000, what are they going to hear? They're going to hear 1,000. So generally I would say, well, overall, the entire thing could be several $1,000s, but to be honest with you, I don't know. It just depends on what you're looking for. And it depends also on how fast you're looking to solve the problem, because if you're looking for fast, that's going to be a little bit more expensive, right? It's going to cost more upfront. So the next question is, who are all the decision makers? This is key. If you don't ask the decision makers, you're going to get the, oh, I got to talk to my spouse objection, which I don't mind that really, as long as the spouse is in the room. If the spouse is not in the room, keep in mind, if they're saying, well, my husband usually makes these decisions, but I'm kind of gathering the information right now. I'm like, okay, cool. Tell you what, let's schedule a time where the 3 of us can actually have the conversation. That way you're not repeating anything. And if he's got questions, I can answer them right there, et cetera, et cetera. So want to know who all the decision makers are in that moment. And this is the question is, this last question is a phenomenal question, is, have you ever worked with someone in my industry before? I like asking this question because regardless of their answer, I'm going to tell them how it is that I work. Hey, have you ever worked with a strategist before? Yeah, one time when I was like, okay, cool, let me tell you how I work. Have you ever worked with a strategist before? No, I've never worked with a strategist before. Cool, well, let me tell you how I work. Either way, whatever the answer, it lets you know. And the nice thing is, if they have worked with someone in your industry before, they kind of know what to expect. So you can understand the expectation, or even say to them, well, how did that go? Right? Oh, it went great. It went horrible. Okay, cool. Well, let me tell you how I work. The last question here is ask permission for a referral. Ask permission for the referral. You're not asking for the referral. You're saying, hey, look, I do a lot of work, and I get a lot of referrals. So it's really, I work my tail off for you. So whether we end up doing business together or not, would it be okay if at some point in the future I asked you to think about maybe someone that you could send my way for a referral? Would that be okay? And everyone says yes. No one's going to say no to that. So that is something to ask. So we're going to come back to that. So remember, don't forget that. Again, this is when you start thinking about the reasons why people will hate selling is because, again, they feel like they have to convince something that they want to do. They hate asking people for money, or they feel like they're bothering people. Remember, this is the reason why if you are struggling with any of these things here, it's because you skipped that. It's because you skipped the discovery session. You didn't ask certain questions up front, and now you're trying to push a rope. Because if you go into the sales conversation, which is coming up next, if you're coming into the sales conversation and you don't have enough information, this is why you're going to struggle. Okay, so let's get into that. So again, this continues the conversation started by the marketing approach. And I follow the same format every single time. I start with bonding and rapport. I go to what's called the upfront contract. I uncover their pain. I demonstrate competence. And then I do a post-sell. So let's get into this. The bonding and rapport is just about, so keep in mind, if this is happening in this like right back to back with the discovery call, this doesn't really occur, right? The bonding and rapport has kind of already happened. But if I am, let's say I'm meeting 3 or 4 days later or 3 or 4 weeks later or whatever it is, I'm reestablishing that emotional connection, but I'm also listening for certain things in the conversation. I'm listening for their fears. I'm listening for things that they're struggling with. I'm listening for the things that are important to them. You spend a heck of a lot more time listening. And most salesmen, when they get nervous, in fact, many people, when they get nervous, what do they tend to do? They tend to become chatty Cathy dolls. And they talk and they talk and they talk, and they never allow the person to get a word edgewise. They feel very uncomfortable with silence. So it's important that you reestablish that emotional connection, but you spend most of your time listening, asking them questions and listening for the things that are important to them, because that is going to matter here coming up. You're listening for those fears. You're listening for those limiting beliefs, those beliefs that they have. You're listening for their attitudes about your product or service. You're listening for the things that are important to them, their interests, their aspirations, their goals. Okay? So after the bonding and rapport is done, then I head into what's called the upfront contract. Now, as you head into the most people, and I'm telling you, this is where people become professional visitors, because they don't know how to stop the bonding and rapport and move into the actual sales. Okay, so keep in mind the selling has already started. It's already started. But what you should do as you're transitioning into the upfront contract is, I'm going to tell you what the upfront contract is here in just a second, but generally there's going to be a lull. And when that lull happens, or sometimes you have to engineer the lull to say, well, you asked me here to talk about insurance, so I guess I probably should earn my paycheck. Something along those lines, something that's going to transition it away from talking about shooting deer and fishing and hunting and, whatever, your vacations on, in the Bahamas, getting it to the point of why you're there. Otherwise, you're nothing more than a professional visitor. And next thing you know, you're sitting down at dinner having pot roast. That's not your job. Your job is not to be a professional visitor. Your job is to advance the sale, either towards qualification or disqualification. One of the two. So, that where you're having that phraseology, okay, well, listen, you invited me here to talk about insurance, so probably should earn my paycheck, right? Okay, so let's get to this. So this upfront contract is, I want you to remember this. It's no, yes, biggest fear. No, yes, biggest fear. So I'm going to take some liberty as I walk through this. So we're bonding, we're rapporting, we're talking about different things. Excellent. So, well, I should probably earn my paycheck. Yeah, you're here. You invited me here to talk about insurance, and we should probably get to that. Yep. Okay, great. Well, listen, before we get started, even though we've already been starting for a while, before we get started, I just want to let you know, Rahib, if this isn't for you, if what I have to offer to you at any time, you can just tell me no. I just want to let you know that I don't want you feeling pressured. I don't want you feeling that you're going to hurt my feelings. My kids are still going to love me. My wife is still going to spend my money. I'm still going to be in good shape. Okay. So you can totally tell me no. But just keep in mind that if I don't feel like we're the best fit for what you need, I might tell you no. Does that sound fair? I wait for the answer. Okay. Yes, no, whatever. Okay, great. So they're generally going to say yes. They say yes. Oh, yep, makes sense. If, on the other hand, that it does make sense and you say yes and I say yes, I think it'll be a good fit, then we can figure out what that looks like on the other side. Does that make sense to you? It's important that they say yes to that. And that's important because the shy yes is a very important thing. You want to get people to get in saying yes, to be in agreement with you, because that psychologically puts them in alignment with you. Okay? Again, it's about safety. So again, we're just agreeing right this. So I've told them right now. So thank you, Rahab. So this is, so you'd say yes, yes, very good. Okay, cool. So listen, my biggest fear is that you're going to, let's press pause. My biggest fear is what I'm going to say from the things that I've learned about from them during the bonding and rapport. Okay? So if I know their attitudes, if I know their goals, I'm going to say, look, my biggest fear is that you're either not going to take action fast enough and this problem is going to continue on for a long time, or you're going to get hooked into another product or service that's going to not solve the problem for you, and that's just going to delay things even further. Right? Now, whatever the biggest fear is it really my biggest fear? No, it's their biggest fear. It's the biggest fear of the individual. So you have to pay attention when you're saying, look, my biggest fear is that this problem is going to continue on, and unfortunately, it's going to get a lot more expensive to fix if you don't fix it now. So from there, what I will do is I'll ask them to transition out of that, and I'm going to do this whole thing as one big batch. Is there anything that you would like to accomplish today? Is there anything specific you'd like to accomplish today? I generally ask that because regardless of the answer, it transitions you to the next thing. So let me just do this one more time. So we're bonding, we're rapporting, we're talking, yada, yada. Excellent. Great. Well, I should probably earn my money. Great. Hey, listen, before we get started, I just want to let you know that if none of this fits what you're looking for, I promise you can tell me no, you're not going to hurt my feelings. Just keep in mind, I might tell you no because I'm not going to sell you something that doesn't work for you. And I'd rather you be a happy customer of someone else's than an unhappy customer of mine. Okay? Does that make sense? Great. So if, on the other hand, you say yes and I say yes, we figure out what that looks like on the other side. Does that make sense? Okay, great. My biggest fear is that you're going to get into, you're going to either wait too long to make a decision where I probably won't be able to help you, or you are going to wait too long and it's going to be really expensive. Okay. So is there anything specific that you'd like to accomplish from our meeting today? Now, whatever they say at that point in time, you'd say, cool, we're going to address that. Okay, we'll have this conversation, whatever. Okay, so that's a really good transition into the next one, which is about uncovering their pain. This is all you're doing. Your job at this point is to sit there, you ask some questions, be curious, and you listen. And that's it. Just listen. You don't need to sit there and come up with all sorts of things. It's important that you're saying, so when you say this, and don't, there's this whole thing, it drives me absolutely nuts when people do this poorly. And again, this is where salesmanship has just gone completely out the window, is that they've heard this technique called the 5 whys, and you're asking it like you're a 5-year-old, and it drives me bananas. Like, well, why do you want to buy insurance? Well, because I love my kids. Well, why do you love your kids? Really? Why do I love my kids? Like that's just the dumbest thing ever. It's like, rather than ask, well, why do you love your kids? Use it in a way it's like, well, let me ask you something. And I know this is going to sound a little harsh, right? So why do you want to buy insurance? Well, I want to take care of my kids in case something happens to me. Okay, great. And I respect that. But what is it about that? When you mean taking care of your kids, what do you mean specifically? And they've got a whole array. Well, I want to have enough money to set each of these in trusts. Okay. And what would that look like? How would they be taken care of individually? Now you're future pacing them. You see what I'm saying? I'm asking educated questions. I'm not asking stupid why questions. It really fires me up when I see this, because I'm telling you, when sales agents do it to me, I shut down. And I'm like, I'm not going to answer a 5-year-old question. Come to me and show me and demonstrate to me that you've done your research and that you've come to me with educated questions. So that is your job. Ask questions and be curious and listen. And you can always use a story format to ask questions and to demonstrate competence. So what you're generally doing is you're using this problem, agitate, solve format. What's the problem? Rub a little salt in the wound and then offer the solution. Okay. And this is, and I'm using it sounding a little harsh, but actually this is the way every commercial advertisement has ever been shown ever in the history of television or radio, is they demonstrate the problem, they rub a little salt in the wound, make, agitate, and then they go, okay, cool. This is the solution. So here's this problem. You owe back taxes to the IRS. You get calls at night. You get bothered at work. You're getting all those notices. You're feeling bad about yourself. Well, here we have a solution for that. So that is the problem, agitate, solution format. So when you're doing this, one of the things you can do is you can infuse story, and the 3T story format is what I utilize with the title, triggering event, and transformation. The title is someone who owes back taxes. Do you owe back taxes? Man, I owed back taxes for years. And all I kept doing is getting my phone call. My phone was getting blown up by calls and bill collectors and everything else. That's my title. I'm feeling like a little bit of a deadbeat, right? That's the title. The triggering event was I fell behind. I got hurt. I couldn't keep up with my bills. Okay. The transformation was, after I met with this tax relief place or this bill relief or this debt relief, then I was actually able to have this transformation on the other side. So that 3T story format, again, I'm going through it really, really fast, but it's really beneficial when you can give yourself that title or give someone that title in the story. What's the triggering event? What happened? And then what's the happily ever after on the other side? What's the transformation that they can experience? It's a very powerful format to use in your storytelling. Remember, your whole job is to create trust with the prospect and telling them stories and demonstrating competence and letting them know that you at least care enough to sit and shut your mouth and listen and ask good questions. So once you've really uncovered their pain, and you'd say, okay, so if I understand the problem, you're really kind of looking at this and this and this, and that's really kind of the issue that you're looking at. Does that sound fair? Yep. Okay. So let me show you a way how I might be able to help you with this. And that is where you start to demonstrate competence. Remember, you got to make sure you're continually advancing the conversation towards the sale or towards disqualification. One of the two. It's either going to go to the end point where the decision needs to be made to buy or not buy, but anywhere along the way, they can take these pathways off that will disqualify the sale. And trust and know, sometimes your prospect on the other side of the table is trying to wander in the conversation. So it's your job to make sure that it's always advancing towards the sale. So when all of these questions are answered, and they're going to be asking questions, you're saying, okay, cool. So you're demonstrating, it's like, so you got this issue. Well, the way that we handle this issue, and if I can be your consultant for just a second, this is something that we can do. And this is a way that problem can be solved. This is another way that problem can be solved. And you're looking and you're just basically saying, they're like, okay, yeah, that makes sense. Okay. So did you have any questions about what it was that I showed you? If they say no, or if they say, no, I think I got all the questions, or they say, well, what about this? And you answer the question. Okay. Any other questions that you have? Any other questions that you have? Well, how much does it cost? Well, we'll get to this in a second, but is there any question around this? Many times they will say, well, what's next? Like, well, how do we move forward with this? Okay. If they're asking that, they've already closed themselves. They're ready to move forward. Okay. If they don't ask that question, then you ask that question. You say, okay, great. Do you have any other questions? And if they don't say, well, what's the next step? Then you say, okay, so do you have any other questions? They say no. Okay. How do you want to proceed? And notice what I didn't do for the last 5 seconds. I did not fill that with words. If it was awkward and I let that hang there, if there's any awkwardness, it's because they're creating it, not me. And I am not going to fill the silence by flapping my gums. It's important that you say, cool, how do you want to proceed? And you let them answer the question. They need time to think. So that is I'm telling you, it's the hardest thing for salespeople to do is to not talk during that moment. And that's where you need to let them answer. So generally they're going to say, well, what are the next steps, blah, blah, or we need to think it over. Okay. Generally, if there's think it overs, it's usually like, okay, well, there's ways to do that. I like Dan Kennedy's approach. Dan Kennedy he's done all sorts of marketing and sales stuff. He likes to say, well, listen, it sounds like you may have some questions, and look, two heads are generally better than one when it comes to solving some problems. So maybe we can think this through out loud right now. Let's talk about maybe what questions that you may have or what's not clear. Okay. I do like that approach, but I'm telling you, it takes some cojones to do it. And I do this based on the feedback, the body language that I'm getting from that individual. But if they're really just kind of delaying me, what I'll generally say is like, look, to me, you needed to think it over is just you're a nice guy or you're a nice person and you don't want to hurt my feelings. If you're not interested, that's okay. I promise, like I said, you can totally tell me no. So to me, you're telling me that you're just not interested. Is that fair to say? I will be a little negative. I won't blow the whole thing up. I'm not going to lob a grenade into the room, but I am going to be a little negative because I want them to defend that position. I might say, no, they're going to, no, I am interested. I really do need to make, I tend to be impulsive when I buy. I like this. There's a lot of things I like about this. I just need to make sure that this is the right move for my family. Okay, fair enough. Right? I will respect that. I will respect that because I don't want people buying things and feeling pressured. I am not that kind of guy. I do want them to feel good about the purchase on the other side of that. But trust and know that what I will do if they do say, okay, well, I really do need to think it over. Okay, listen, today's Wednesday, today's Thursday. How about I follow up with you tomorrow at 4:00? Would that be enough time? Right? So I do want to, I set the meeting. They set the next meeting at that meeting. I want them to know that I'm going to follow up with them and when I'm going to do that. So I will set a meeting to follow up with them. That way they know there's a timeline. And I'm not going to set it like, there's people that are like, yeah, let's set it for June. I'm like, dude, it is March. I mean, really? That tells me that you're just not that interested, and that's okay. All right. Now, if they've got a real reason, like, well, tomorrow I'm going in for surgery and I'm probably going to be in a coma for, 4 weeks. Oh, good reason, like that makes sense. So I'm just saying like that would be, there are legitimate reasons. I just want to let you know that's all situational. So we've talked about bonding rapport, upfront contract, uncovering their pain, demonstrating competence. Now you get into the post sell. The post sell is really critical. Let's say they move forward. They're super excited. I always want to make sure I ask this question. Hey, before we sign the check and before you give me the check, before we sign the paperwork, can I just ask you, why are you okay to move forward right now? What do you, tell me why you're okay to move forward with this right now? I ask that question because it really reduces the amount of callbacks. It really reduces the amount of chargebacks. I like this because now when they go home, and they get the brother-in-law that's going to show up and say, dude, you got totally ripped off. No, they've already justified it logically in their head so that they can tell the brother-in-law to go pack sand. So that's why I'm saying, like, this is important for them because people will buy emotionally and they justify logically. I want them to justify logically right now. That's the post sell. So why are you okay to move forward with this right now? Really, really powerful. Last component here. These are just some different success strategies. This is something known as the peak end rule. The peak end rule is that most people will base their entire experience based on the peak of the experience and the end of the experience. You can't really control the peak of the experience with them, but you certainly can control the end. So this is where you really want to make a really positive experience at the very end. Don't just make the last thing where you're just, signing it and heading out. Give them something to look forward to. Make sure that they know what the next steps are. Make them feel like as if they've got something. Just make sure that they're ending off on a high note with this, whether they signed or whether they didn't, because it's important that they look at that entire experience based on the peak and the end. And you don't really have a say to what their peak of their experience is. You don't know where that's going to be for them, but you do control the ending. So that's important. Make sure you follow up. This is something that I see all the time with salespeople, that they just absolutely suck at it. They follow, well, yeah, I want to call them, but I've already called them twice. Man, you need to call them 7 or 8 times, like minimum, because that's where most of the sales are going to happen, is not in calling 2 or 3 times. I'm telling you right now, I am on some sort of list. I inquired one time about getting a business loan from one of these like business financing things. Oh my gosh, man, these people are on it. And they call me and call me and call me and call me. And I'm like, man, you guys are really good at this, right? But they follow up and they're not shy about it. And it was just really interesting to see that, like, how much they're doing it. And they're salesmen. They're good at it. The whole thing around the success strategies is, look, you got to first and foremost bring massive value to them. Bring value to them that with things that they are going to value, not things you're going to value, but make sure that it's valuable to them. That's why, again, it's important you know your avatar. You must align your lead generation with your sales. That has to be in alignment. Bring solutions, not just punching them in the mouth with birthday cake, but bring real solutions. Bring solutions that matter to them and their problem. And finally, have a support system. We're going to talk about a support system here in just a second. But before we do that, I want you to think, what do you still need to do? What did we not do? What did we forget? You got to get your referral, right? Remember in the discovery, question 5, hey, is it okay if in the future I ask you to think of someone that might be helpful, that might use my product or service? Yes, ask them now. So, hey, remember back when we started this conversation that I might ask you for someone who might know, who might use X, Y, or Z or whatever it is? Is there anyone that you might be able to think of, whether they have purchased from you or whether they have not? The point is that you have treated, that's why you want to bring massive value and you want to treat them fairly. So again, asking for the referral, and I'm telling you, this one thing alone can really change your effectiveness in your selling. So we're talking about having a support system. This is interesting because it's really about having an entire, a football team is an entire team that has all the different support systems in there, right? You've got the head coach and you've got the line coach and you've got the defense coach. You've got all these people supporting, all heading towards one specific direction. And I get this. And I just want you to understand, like, when you're looking at really having the people behind you that are really going to help you be successful, it's really important that you have that support system. So that support system is really, really important. And this is what I'm going to offer to you guys. I have a school community. If you're interested, you can join this. If you're looking for connections to folks who are just like you, let's say that you are a business owner, or if you're just wanting to be part of a community, I'm going to pull that up and I'm going to put the link in the comments section. But if you are interested in being part of group training calls each week that are around the 4 core functions of business, the lead generation, the sales, the operations, the accounting, getting into the 4 core functions of business of lead generation, or looking through the 4 core functions through the lens of the Viper framework, which is vision, infrastructure, process, execution, reporting, getting into all of the different types of classroom trainings that are around leadership, around the trust, vision, communication paradigm, and all of the different strategies that we have that you can incorporate into your business. If you're looking for someone with one-to-one coaching strategy sessions, that would be one-to-one with me. So if you hate my face, don't sign up because it's me and you're going to get me. You're not going to get anybody else. You're not going to get handed off to anybody else. But all of this stuff, if this is important, listen, for the first 90 days, if you get in there and you absolutely hate it and you don't think this was worth your money, I will happily give your money back. And I offer that 90-day money back guarantee. So if this is interesting, you can go to school.com/strategic boardroom. That is what the page looks like. So if you want to head there right now, I don't have any questions that are on the session. So thank you so very much for sticking around, and I'll see you guys in the boardroom. Take good care.